Just outside the small town of Milford, Utah, population 1,507, something big is happening that could reshape the clean energy landscape worldwide. Already known as Utah's Renewable Energy Corridor, the area is home to the state's three operating geothermal power plants, including the Blundell plant, operated by PacifiCorp, the Thermo plant, operated by Circ Energy, and the Cove Fort plant, operated by Enel Green Energy, as well as a windmill farm with over 160 windmills and a solar field. Combined, these generate enough electricity to power more than 200,000 homes daily. Researchers are now working in the area on developing a new way to tap into geothermal energy that could expand its usefulness around the globe. And Utah's Division of Water Rights is helping oversee the process to ensure the protection of the state's natural resources. To understand the project, it's important to understand how geothermal power production traditionally works. In the simplest perspective, naturally occurring heat from deep in the earth superheats groundwater in fractured rocks, which is extracted via deep vertical wells in the form of steam, flash steam at the surface, or superheated groundwater, which is then used to spin turbines, which generate electricity. Once the heat from the hydrothermal fluids are utilized to produce electricity at the surface, cooled water is then injected back underground into the same geothermal reservoir from which it came. Traditionally, this has required the water to already be available underground for extraction, limiting where geothermal plants could be built. The Division of Water Rights has been regulating these types of plants since the Utah Geothermal Resource Conservation Act was put into effect. Rules directing the administration of wells used for the discovery and production of geothermal energy in the state of Utah were put into effect shortly thereafter. The new process being developed employs proven technologies used in the oil and gas industry, including directional and horizontal drilling and induced fracture stimulation. Traditional geothermal development requires hot rocks with saturated fractures tapped by vertical wells. This new technology only requires the natural presence of hot rocks. Fractures can then be induced in the rock, and water can be introduced into and through these hot fractures. The process requires the drilling of two or more horizontal wells into unfractured hot rocks. These wells can reach more than 10,000 feet long and over 8,000 feet deep. Horizontal wells allow for a much greater surface area in contact with hot rocks than vertical wells. The wells are drilled parallel to one another at a calculated distance apart, and fractures are induced in the hot rocks between the wells. Water is then injected into the injection well, where it is superheated while it travels through the fractures to the production well, where it is extracted. Depending upon the temperature of the extracted fluid, electricity can then be generated from a turbine energized by direct steam, flash steam, or through a binary heat exchanger. The water used in this process is then recirculated back into the injection wells, and this process can be repeated indefinitely as long as the heat source in the rocks remains constant. This relatively new technology is called Enhanced Geothermal Systems, or EGS. Presently, the Department of Energy is funding a large EGS project near Milford, which is led by the University of Utah's Energy and Geoscience Institute. This project is called the Frontier Observatory for Research on Geothermal Energy, or FORGE. Jim Goddard, head of the Division of Water Rights Well and Geothermal Program, has been regulating the FORGE project for the state since its beginning. He says regulating geothermal use has been a role of the Division of Water Rights for decades.
So the Division of Water Rights was given jurisdiction through statute, through a law in 1981. So it's really from that point that the Division of Water Rights, or the State Engineer's Office, has regulated geothermal officially. Prior to that, we were still overseeing most of the geothermal because it still required a water right, and so it would have been processed through the normal water right process for geothermal, but it was quickly realized that that's not enough. There needed to be more regulation or a different level of regulation for geothermal for power production. And so in 1981, that statute was created, and then shortly thereafter, administrative rules were created for the exploration and production of geothermal energy.
Jim says the process to develop geothermal energy is very involved, and for good reason.
Applicants need to file a very detailed plan of operations that they submit to us that details every aspect of drilling, what the geology and hydrogeology is, what they're expecting to encounter. And it's a very voluminous process to submit a plan of operations. And we review those, we permit them. Oftentimes there's many iterations we go through to make sure that they're following our rules and protecting the resource and the environment in doing that.
And once a plant is built and operating, the Division of Water Rights continues to oversee regulation of it.
Once the system is in place, then it's not over. We continue to regulate. So we regulate the existing geothermal plants even now. They're required to submit to us monthly reports for production and injection, for what they're doing, the amount of energy that they're producing. We receive that information. Anytime they go inside of a well to work it over, to change the pump, do anything like that, they're required to notify us and get authorization to do that. They're required every 5 years for their injection wells to conduct what's called the mechanical integrity test, which makes sure the casing is still intact and that the seals behind the casing are intact so that none of those geothermal fluids that they're re-injecting can come up into an overlying aquifer.
Jim says after Utah's 3 existing geothermal electricity plants were developed, the push to develop additional geothermal power in the state died out. That all changed with the Forge project.
In 2016, so 2016, the Department of Energy wanted to conduct this big research project to determine whether this enhanced geothermal system technology would be feasible. And from 2016 on, this project has been kind of slowly developing to where now they have completed the 2 wells, the injection well and the production well, and they're about ready to test to determine whether they can get connection between those 2 wells and actually produce water or circulate water through those systems. And so prior to that point, there was not a lot going on in terms of new development of geothermal energy. There were the 3 existing sites. They started converting to binary production probably about 20 years ago. But other than us regulating them, there was not a lot of new exploration, not a lot of new development. And then this Forge project, the DOE Forge project, came along by Milford, and they're studying this technology. And that has allowed other companies to understand this is a completely public research project. So it's all of their findings and results are out there, and entities are now starting to use that technology and put it into production. That in combination with it's a very green energy. There are grants and there are startup funds. There's a lot of funding available and tax cuts and things like that that are available to apply this technology. And because of that, over the last 2 years, we have been bombarded with new applications for exploration work to find more areas where this would be applicable. And now it's even come into production.
Although the Forge project is ongoing, Jim says other companies, like Fervo Energy, have already put the advances from the project into commercial use in other states and are working on developing new plants in Utah. Jim says these new projects are just the latest in a trend to use the Earth's geothermal energy as an environmentally friendly way to meet growing needs.
We've talked a lot about the geothermal energy, the hot geothermal, but there's also a huge push since about 2020, or since the early 2000s, that a fairly new technology called heat pump or ground source heat pump technology, which is used for the heating and cooling of structures, homes, businesses, schools, government buildings, whatever. And since 2000, that technology has been applied and really expanded significantly in the state of Utah. It's a great tool to effectively heat and cool homes with a lot less cost. There's a higher cost up front, but over time the cost is significantly less, and it's fairly green because you're not using as much electricity for these types of systems. And we consider those geothermal ground source or geothermal heat pumps is what they're referred to. And pretty much any new school, any new government building, and a lot of residential buildings in the state are going in with these systems. And we regulate those as well through our water right law. Permit is required for those systems, and for the most part they're safe. We have had some issues with them impacting existing public supply wells, but if they're done correctly with the processes we have now, then it's a great technology, and it will continue to be used and expanded in the state of Utah.
From regulating geothermal energy to adjudicating water rights to protecting the natural resource value of Utah's rivers and streams, the Division of Water Rights oversees the use of some of the state's most precious natural resources.